Hey everybody, how are we? Welcome to a bonus episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Yes, a bonus edition because as is typical, just about an hour or so after we published this morning's episode, there was a big bit of news. There was a big bit of news reported by Sammy Mockbell of the BBC in which he said Leandro Trossard is likely to leave Arsenal this summer. Interesting, isn't it? Because we had a whole discussion around what Arsenal could still do in terms of the transfer window, whether there was room for another attacker, whether there was room for an attacker that wasn't a specialist left winger. That's kind of the debate that we've been having about Eberechi Eze. And all of this, of course, was prompted and sparked by the fact that we woke up to reports this morning that actually Tottenham are pushing for Eberechi Eze, that Tottenham have sort of garnered the player's interest in that he would be keen, according to Fabrizio Romano, to join them. So it's been really, really interesting, hasn't it? It's been really, really interesting to see kind of the way this has developed. And when we were talking about, you know, what we should do, what we could do, and we were talking a lot about the left winger scenario and situation. And a lot of people were saying, look, I really like Eberechi Eze. He's a fantastic talent, but he's not an out-and-out left winger. Therefore, where does he kind of fit into the bigger picture? I was kind of saying, well, does it need to be an out-and-out left winger when you've still got Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard at the club? Now, yes, we have heard rumors of clubs in Turkey, of clubs in Italy, of rival Premier League clubs having an interest in Leandro Trossard. But up until this point, we had no real reason to believe that his departure was likely. We talked a lot about his contract situation. He's going into the final year of his contract. It's kind of now or never in terms of getting some money for him. There was suggestions earlier on in the summer that Arsenal had opened contract talks with Leandro Trossard, but those contract talks centered around him getting a bit of a pay bump rather than it being about extending the term of his stay at Emirates Stadium. So it's all been a little bit confusing, but this is the first, I would say, real indication that we've had. And, you know, the reports from Turkish newspapers saying he's going to Fenerbahce and Galatasaray and all that, put that to one side. This is the first real indication we've had that Leandro Trossard's departure from Arsenal this summer is likely. In which case, does that change things for Arsenal in the final third? I think it does. I really, really think it does. And is this something that's come out in response to, you know, the idea of Eberechi Eze going to Tottenham? Like, has this come out because Arsenal want to show that they're still in the mix and that they mean business? I mean, everybody keeps talking about departures, and how Arsenal need to focus on outgoings before they can dip back into the market and bring someone else in. We talk a lot about the finances involved in these types of deals. The Eberechi Eze deal is going to cost a lot of money if that's one that Arsenal is seeking to do. I've questioned that. I've doubted that because I've said repeatedly that if Arsenal are in for this guy, there's no way that he chooses to join Tottenham. Well, Fabrizio Romano is telling us that he's keen on Tottenham. Therefore, Arsenal can't have seriously entered the party yet. It's the only explanation. I've talked a lot before about how, for me, I don't think it is so much to do with the transfer fee. I think it's probably more so to do with squad balance and keeping that wage bill under control. Leandro Trossard's not one of the biggest earners at Arsenal. When I had a little look earlier, and it was just from a Google search, and, you know, you never really know these things for sure, but it sounds like and looks like he's on around about 100 grand a week. I'd imagine that if you signed someone like Eberechi Eze, who would be making a big move, you would probably have to fork out significantly more than that. But getting someone like Leandro Trossard off the wage bill, moving on some of the other players, of course, that are still collecting salaries from Arsenal. Reece Nelson is said to be on around about 100 grand a week as well. All of a sudden, there's 200 grand available to spend on someone else and to spend on someone else's wages. So is this the departure that is key to Arsenal dipping back in the transfer market? Because Mikel Arteta's never ruled it out. Arsenal as a football club have never ruled it out. The journalists that have been covering the club very, very closely have never ruled it out. They've always said it's about departures now. And if Arsenal are going to go back into the market, it's likely to be for a left winger. Is it going to be a specialist left winger, or is it going to be someone like Eberechi Eze who can play in multiple positions? That remains unclear. But I think this is significant. The news that Arsenal are going to lose Leandro Trossard means, for me, that there's an even greater need now to go back into the market and bring in another option on that left-hand side. I felt that with Martinelli and Trossard still at the club, with Madueke's arrival, that, it could be unlikely that Arsenal dip into the market for a player in that position again. Despite my belief that we're one short still, it felt like the club could kind of justify not doing so, given the volume of players that we have available and that can operate in those areas. But if Trossard leaves, then the need is a big one, in my opinion. So I wanted to jump on and just have my quick say on this, because I felt like this morning's podcast was pretty interesting, in that I felt a real wave of negativity coming through from the live chat box because people are frustrated. And I don't know that that was so much to do with the squad as much as it was to do with the fact that we've long admired Ebere Eze as a fan base. We've long admired Rodrigo as a fan base. And I said it's really, really important that you differentiate between what you want, what you believe the right thing is as a supporter, and what the club think and what the club are actually doing and actually actively working on. You've got to accept and acknowledge that you're not always going to get the deals that you want. I've had to make peace with that. Every other Arsenal fan has to make peace with that. I understood the frustration and the meltdown when we woke up this morning and read that Ebere Eze was seemingly Tottenham bound, that Rodrigo was seemingly Manchester City bound. But if Arsenal are to move Leandro Trossard on in this window, as well as your Reece Nelsons, your Sambi Lokongas, your Fabio Vieiras, there is a chance, I believe, that Arsenal dip back into the transfer window and bring in that final piece of the puzzle, the icing on top of the cherry, on top of the cake. I hope it's Eze. It could be someone else. There's no way, I don't think, that Arsenal can allow Leandro Trossard to go without bringing in someone else. You might make the case that Nwaneri's developed and is at a better level now and can contribute, that Kai Havertz could play in a multitude of attacking positions and he's not the centre forward necessarily anymore, which frees him up. You could argue that Max Dowman's coming through, but none of those players really feel like a natural fit on that left-hand side. And so if Arsenal can go and find someone, that would be great. As I said earlier, I feel like they've half addressed the problem on the left by bringing in Noni Madueke, but they haven't completely filled that void, haven't completely fixed that issue. And it was an issue last season, right? I've got a lot of sympathy for Leandro Trossard because I think that he did an admirable job last season, given the problems that we had, the over-reliance that we then had on him as a result of all the issues we were dealing with. And obviously, like, he was playing as a false nine at times, and that doesn't really work for me when you're talking about Leandro Trossard. So it was a tough old season for him. But at his age, you don't really want to commit to a bumper contract for him. So he's naturally going to be looking elsewhere. There's a year to go, which means, you're kind of at a bit of a stalemate where it's kind of like either part ways, sell him, move on, allow him to go and get a big deal for the next 3-4 years that will sort him and his family out, or you just accept that you're going to lose him on a free. And I think because of the arrival of Noni Madueke, and hopefully because Arsenal intend to dip back into the market and bring in one more player, there's probably an understanding and an acceptance that actually letting him go and getting in 10 or so, 15 or so million pounds plus saving on his wages could just give us that extra little bit of headroom that we need to go out and get the player that we all want and the player that we believe can be a difference maker. Leandro Trossard has been a great servant to Arsenal. When he came in, I think a lot of people were underwhelmed because everybody was really excited about the prospect of signing Mykhailo Mudryk initially. Mykhailo Mudryk has been one of the worst Premier League signings in the history of the league, and I don't think that's unfair to say. So we dodged a bullet there. We brought in this guy for a third of the price. He's done a really good job. He's been present in really big and important moments. He's scored really important goals. He's contributed. There's no question about that whatsoever. But he's never really established himself as the go-to left winger. Martinelli's always seemed to pip him when everybody's fit and available. So there's a preference on Mikel's part for Martinelli because of his all-round game, I think. So if you don't trust Trossard as a starter and you see him as more of a squad player, which is fine, I would keep him if, there is no intention to do any other business. But if there is an intention to do another bit of business, then Leandro Trossard is one of the players that you can afford to lose and afford to move on. And this has given me a confidence and a belief that maybe, just maybe, we're not done yet. Maybe when we were talking about Arsenal closing the door, pulling down the shutters, no further business as far as this transfer window is concerned, perhaps that was a premature analysis and assessment of the current situation. I do find it interesting that this came out on the same day, just very, very shortly after we hear that Eze is being eyed up by Tottenham, that Rodrigo's heading to Man City. Look, we might sign neither of those two players, but I think this is the biggest indication we've had yet that Arsenal are still active, despite what Mikel says. You know, we're still looking, we're still aware, we're still, sort of keeping a close eye on the market, etc., etc. If Leandro Trossard leaves, which feels likely now based on what Sammy Mokbel's had to say, that's the biggest indicator yet, I think, that Arsenal are not done yet and still have business to do. And hopefully it's on that left flank. But yeah, interesting. I thought I'd just jump on, give you some thoughts on that. Don't forget to like the video if you haven't done so already. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, then go ahead and leave us a review as well. All of that stuff really, really does help. Yeah, thank you all so much for the love and support. Let me know what you think. Does Leandro Trossard leaving open the door to one of those signings that we all desperately want to see between now and the end of the window? You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Thank you so much for your continued support. Remember, you can check out the main pod from earlier on in the day. It's the last episode on your feed, last video on the channel if you're with us on YouTube. See you all soon. Goodbye.